Welcome back. We are back for another episode in our coaching and leadership series, and I am joined today by Team USA Senior International Coach Cara Slaughter. I am beyond thrilled to finally have you here, and I'm so honored to have you on the Strength in the Details podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well, Anaja. It's so good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're an accomplished and decorated athlete and coach that I think that I can speak for myself. You've inspired me in my own coaching journey, and I know that you've done that for so many. So I'm really excited to get your perspective on the leadership and coaching aspect of our sport. But before we jump in, tell us about yourself and how you first found Olympic weightlifting as an athlete.
So I started Olympic weightlifting when I was 13 in Southern California, and I was a track and field athlete, and I played basketball. And so I would lift weights just to get stronger for the shot put and basketball. And so basically, it was sport performance training. And then my coach said, "Hey, let's get you on a local meet." I had no idea you could even compete in this stuff. I was like, okay, we got some singlets. I say we, it was my sister Gina and myself. We got singlets from the men's wrestling team
Okay.
and went to a competition, and that's how it got started.
Wow. It's interesting because I think that when I first found weightlifting, it was through CrossFit. But one of the themes that I find as I talk to people is that everyone wishes that they would have known about weightlifting at 13 years old, earlier in their lives. How do you think becoming or competing in the sport and just being an athlete in general kind of impacted you and your personal growth?
Well, sports in general just gave me confidence. It was, something that I found success in pretty early on, and I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was how I made friends. So, getting started early on, it just gave me, a place to have a community and build work ethic and um, eventually even travel the world because some of the teams that I was qualifying for, I was fortunate enough to travel and compete. So, yeah, that was kind of the carrot for me in Olympic weightlifting specifically that I could go and compete internationally. So I was all in.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for parents who, may be from the outside and their young child is looking into Olympic weightlifting and they're like, whoa, that looks scary. That looks dangerous. Do you have anything that might help shift the narrative a bit about our sport for young athletes specifically?
Well, I think with teens that come into our sport or youth athletes that come into our gym, specifically, I am really just teaching them how to move their bodies. Whether it's something that's related to using dumbbells, kettlebells, empty bars, the technique bars, 5 kilo barbells. We're really just teaching them proper movement, and they'll progress. But initially, I'm looking at getting them to move properly, right? Can you do a proper hip hinge? Can you brace? Can you balance? All those things, and then it's sort of natural after that. And like once you understand how to move, okay, we can be more technical and get into the details of the Olympic weightlifting.
Yeah. So, as you reflect on your career as an athlete, what can you share about the importance of coaching? 'Cause now you're an elite high level coach, and I think people really look up to you for that. How does coaching and mentorship, how did that impact your success?
Um, well, I would say like the mentorship when I was an athlete or as I
Yes.
mentor now as an athlete.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, well, I think I had a few coaches over the course of my career, whether it was when I was in high school, college, or beyond. And I think what I learned was to just be all in. Like whatever you're doing, be all in. And
Mhm.
all of all my coaches had different coaching styles, maybe even a slightly different coaching philosophy. But in what I did was buy into whatever was in front of me. And
Hmm.
it ended up being successful, fortunately, right? But um, I as a coach, I'm going to kind of switch hats here a little bit. When I'm coaching now, one of the things that impedes an athlete's progress or the pace at which they progress is not buying into the process, right? Like
Hmm.
half doing it or questioning it constantly along the way. And I don't mean having questions, I mean
Hmm.
questioning the process itself on a regular basis. So, um, that can slow people down, and I trusted my coaches when I was doing it, and they were different. They had different training programs, and they had some of them had different philosophies in terms of attempt selection and competition. But if you don't do a full process, like if you don't fully buy into a coach's process, you're not really doing it and you're not really doing anything. You're just sort of half
Hmm.
in, half out. So, of course, that's not going to work. So,
Right.
that was something that I just decided wherever I was going to be all in. And that it's still something that I do as a coach and a business owner, and even my commitments to my athletes now as a coach. Right, I'm all in until there's a reason not to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's that I think that really sums up what I have seen of you in competition, like in the competition environment as a coach. You're in the back and you are 100% bought into what is happening right in front of you. You seem laser focused. And I see that translate to your athletes. Your athletes are also right there. They're present and they're focused on the task at hand. I think that there's so many distractions now, right? Like with social media, with what's happening, kind of in society. I think it's easy for athletes to question, why are we doing it this way, or wanting to jump ship before they give the process an opportunity to really fully play out. And I've seen that really hurt athletes. Is that something that you have noticed or has changed recently?
There's a lot of information on the internet now at your fingertips to learn how to do anything, right? Athletes
Hmm.
can learn, coaches can learn. Um, and with that, sometimes there's so much information, it can paralyze people or cause them to overthink everything that's happening at every step of the way. And even with really clear directions about, okay, we're going to do this, it is somehow um, made more complicated by this basically people trying to entertain so much information, right?
Hmm.
And it's not necessary. It's unfortunate, um, and so I just try to remind athletes, like, hey, this is what we're going to do today. This is what we're going to do today. This is the plan. Also, we can have a discussion about what you found, right? I,
Hmm.
I don't I don't want to discourage like that athlete that is intellectually curious or wants to understand why. That's not what I'm saying, because I'm also a teacher. I'm also an educator in terms of weightlifting coaching, right?
Hmm.
But at one point you have to stop talking and start doing. And if we're not
Right.
doing, we're not clocking reps, right? So we can't be talking all the time. But there's a place for both. Like, you can do both. And if it's about, okay, we're gonna have a discussion, like in my gym we have group coaching, and for 30 minutes before the group coaching even starts, we have what I call office time. And that is designated time to do what you're kind of, some of the things we're talking about is saying, hey, you saw this, you're trying to understand where this makes sense in your programming or in your journey or whatever it is, right? Is this something we can do? Can we do this off the blocks? Can we do this exercise? Can we fill in the blank, right? And then we
Right.
talk about it.
Okay. What convinces you to go with that change. And let me kind of give you some context. Sometimes we experience athlete comes in, they're like, "Hey, I saw this off blocks," right? Like, can we implement that today? Can we change my program to do that?
Mhm.
Because I'd like to give it a try. When do you say, yes, athlete, let's do it? Versus when do you say, hold on, athlete, let's continue to talk about that.
Sure. Well, I mean, we're always in the driver's seat as coaches. And to your point, it's saying when, when is the time to entertain the question. And I think that's why I just make designated time to do it. Right. So if somebody asks, let's say they want to go, I don't know, they want to go off blocks, or they want to go below the knee instead of above the knee, or whatever, right? Sometimes I'll say, hey, yeah, athlete's choice, go for it today. Not going to make a difference, right? But I'm also looking at, will they be successful if they implement that today?
Mm.
Um, are they emotionally resilient enough to try something new and not spiral down if they don't succeed? What impact is that
Okay.
going to have on the training environment if this athlete
Right.
loses it, right? Like,
Right.
um, there's a whole bunch of factors that go into whether it's just their individual program, or do I have the time today relative to number of people in the gym to teach something new, to help them understand
Mm-hmm.
it, to make sure it's an effective use of time, that exercise is actually being utilized in the way it should to benefit them.
Mm-hmm.
All kinds of things go into that decision. And yeah, so the answer is it depends.
We love, I feel like we love as coaches. It depends. Let's talk about it. And I feel like athletes are like, what does it depend on? Like, I want to know
Right.
all of the X, Y's, and Z's. And I'm like, ah.
Yeah. Like, I'll give you another example. Someone came in and they were like, I need to work on getting under the bar. I need to work on getting under the bar. And this is an athlete that the bar like crashes on them. It like this they're snatching, right? And the bar crashes on them. Like, so they're not pushing up on it, they're not meeting it high enough. But they had got in their head somehow that they need to get under the bar faster. And from what I could see, what it looked like was they just need to be faster. Just
Mm,
not under the bar, just generally they need to be faster, but they are focused on getting under the bar faster. In the face of a bar, they press out, like the bar comes down on them going underneath the
mhm,
snatch, right? So this is their interpretation because they're watching the world championships or whatever, this cup, that cup, whatever, and they're saying, I need to look like that.
mhm,
And so they come in telling me I need to get under the bar faster. And I say, okay, this is a moment. This is an educational opportunity here. So I'm going to explain a little bit more to that athlete about what they're looking at and what they're perceiving, and the ways in which they actually need to train to be more powerful and generate speed, right? As opposed
mhm.
to signing off on this idea that they need to get under the bar faster. It's a misunderstanding, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
We love that. We love the educational opportunities. And we're
Yeah.
also appreciative when athletes are willing to accept those educational opportunities, because they're not always as appreciative as we'd like them to be. So I think that's a two-way street. The athlete has to be receptive, and the coach has to be willing to take that opportunity. I think that's
Right.
important.
I think it's really important. And we always, I think it's important to tie it to their goal, right? Like,
Hmm.
in order for you to hit X number, or in order for you to snatch this much weight, which will contribute to that total that they want to qualify for the national championships. I'm going to make this up, right? Any scenario like this, right? We need to lock out, and we need to get credit for lifts. So I am giving you something that is going to help you lock out, as opposed to this other idea that is showing up that you need to get under the bar faster, right? So it's always just
Mm-hmm.
like tying it into, I think, the goal that they want, and why doing it this way is going to help them get to the goal. Otherwise, we just lose them, right? It's just our knowledge of what can work and why, but it never landed with them in a way that they can own it and train for it, right? So
Yeah.
I think the communication is really important.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Did you always imagine that you would transition into coaching after your athletic career?
No, nope, wasn't going to do it.
No? How did you get here?
uh, so there were some people that were suggesting I should do it. Dr. Kyle Pierce was one of them. Ursula was another one. And I just thought, no, it's not for me. And then Ursula said, why don't you just come to a clinic? I'm teaching in New York. I was in California at the time. She's in Texas, right?
Mhm.
She's like, I'm teaching a clinic in New York. You should come and just help me with it. And I go, well, I'll come, but I don't really want to help you. I'll just watch you, right? Because I didn't want to coach, right? I was like, I'll watch you. It'll be fun to hang out. So I'm
You're
going
right.
essentially to hang out. And she's like already clear
She
that
has
she's going to have me help her coach. Yeah.
she has other methods in her box for you.
Yep. 100%. So we get on the floor and she's teaching, doing everything, and then it turns into like the athletes doing drills. And I remember there was an athlete moving a certain way, and I was on one side of this athlete, and she was on the other side of him. And I was looking at him, she was looking at him, and then I held, and then she gave the coaching cue, and it was almost exactly what I was going to say, and I was like, hmm. Right? It was just like, huh.
Yeah.
And then the other thing about it, so it just kind of boosted my confidence. And then the other thing about it was she was a woman, right? He was a woman
Mm,
commanding full respect of this clinic of, you know, athletes. And she wasn't just coaching, she was teaching. And I just took it all in. I was like, this is amazing. Like the way she is doing all of this, I was like, I'm totally into this. This is not what I thought. And so then I started. And I would say also what kind of made it, what continued to facilitate this idea that I could do this was CrossFit, right? You had this huge audience of athletes on the barbell, but also women on the barbell. And up to this point, most of the coaching assignments in USA weightlifting, well, all of them, maybe except for Stephanie Chirelli, were men. So I thought, I just didn't see myself in that. Like, so when I
mhm,
was an Olympian, I was thinking, I don't know that I could do this because really, in hindsight, what it was is I didn't see anyone like me doing
mm.
this coaching, right? So, um, yeah, when I saw Ursula and then I saw all these women on the barbell, I thought, okay, there's a place for me. Like I can do this.
I don't know if you remember this, but I was in Daytona Beach, AO. This was when I was in AO3. That was the first time I met you. I think it was Daytona. Um, and I said, oh my God, there is a woman coaching and she looks like me. And that was the very first time I ever even thought that I could potentially be successful as a coach. I was doing the athlete thing, and that was great, but I never saw myself as a coach because I never saw anyone that looked like me doing it at a high level that was respected, that knew what they were talking about. And I was like, okay, maybe, just maybe, I could I can do this. Had no idea where to start. Which goes to my question for you is if someone wants to get into this sport, a woman wants to get into this sport, a woman of color wants to get into the sport, where do we start? What should we focus on?
So my goal through the work that I do through my 12-week coaches academy and my roundtable that meets on Zoom is to create or make space available for women coaches, coaches of color to basically to create competence in their competence, right? So if with the 12-week Coaches Academy, we're doing live coaching under observation. We're going over, exercises to correct athletes' technique, how to work with how to work with athletes, right? And we're talking in the CHFP Coaches Roundtable, we're going under multiple themes, whether it's fixing technique, developing an athlete for international competition, programming, business design, running your own club and team, right? It's creating spaces where we can build competence and then have competence in that competence, because we are going to, like, when you think of women coaches or coaches of color or the intersection of those things, we we are going to need to be able to say, I have competence in what I'm doing, whether you're standing in the face of racism, sexism, any of the isms you want, bias, right? Like, you just need to be able to be competent in what you're doing, and that is what you can control, right? So that's what I try to create space for in the work that I'm doing and supporting different programs for coaches to develop.
It's awesome. And you're right. I think that that's a really great first step, is to build that competence and then have confidence in it. And I really appreciated watching the work that you've done with athletes, and I feel like that your leadership extends to the other coaches in your club. I've had the privilege of meeting a lot of them. I've worked with Brian several times, and I really just I feel like what you stand for, you've kind of elevated the expectation of what it means to be a coach. What are some of those leadership traits that you would say make you a successful high level coach?
Uh, I'm good at delegating. I don't mind it.
Okay.
Do not mind it. Um, and taking steps to enable, like, coaches to support athletes, right? Like, we have a large team, and so it's not realistic that I'm going to be at every meet. It is not realistic that even if I'm at the meet, that I'm going to be at every platform, because sometimes we have athletes competing on different platforms at the same time. And we have a lot of competent coaches at our gym. So it's just making sure that they have the skills they need. The athletes are prepared in advance. We communicate, the coaching staff, we communicate about our athletes, like what they're working on, the specific ways that they need support. Um, Even when it comes to training, right? Whenever athletes do that thing, that is their thing, right? It could be a technical thing, it could be an emotional thing, it could be a mental thing. Whenever they do that thing they're gonna do, because that's what they do, we practice in training. Like, when that shows up, how are you going to course correct? What does that look
Mm,
like? What do you need to be thinking about to pull yourself out? Right? Otherwise, that has to be in them, and it can't be locked in me, inside of me, knowing, like,
mm,
oh, this is how I go fix that. Like, no, it has to be something they know, so that, I'm not their crutch. They can do it on their own, and that the coaches know about it if they haven't worked that much with that particular athlete, but they can step in and do the work. They're aware of how to support that athlete as well.
yeah.
And so, yeah, just enabling and delegating are two things I'm pretty comfortable and consistently doing, so that I am not their crutch. I'm their coach, but I'm not their crutch. Like, they could
I,
do it without me,
I
you
like
know?
that. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that. I think we're gonna put that on a t-shirt.
go for it.
Olympic weightlifting is an individual sport. It's you're on the platform by yourself, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
also I've learned that it's very much a team sport. And
yeah.
one of the things that I have admired about what you're doing is that you foster this sense of camaraderie and teamwork. What does that mean for you, and why has that been such a pillar of your team's success?
Mm. Thank you for that. Well, I think I think the environment is really important, and the culture in the environment is really important. So, like, if you just think about our gym, like, it's important to me that people feel welcome when they come into the space.
Mhm.
Um, there were times when, if I'm leaving my training facility, as an Olympian, like I'm not training where I was training and I had to go somewhere else and work out. Um, a lot of times I was just in a corner, not talking to anyone. Oftentimes, sometimes just the woman in the room with men, right? Or male athletes, young, whatever, high school, college, even professional sometimes. And I never felt welcome in the room.
Mhm.
Even as an Olympian, I was still over in this corner because I wasn't on that football team at that college, while I was lifting or whatever. Like it's different context, right? Because that's a sport team, and the coach made a call so I could lift in that weight room because there weren't CrossFit gyms and there weren't places to drop weights. So I was always like just like grateful to be there. Thanks for letting me lift here to get my training in, and then off I would go. And so I thought to myself, if I ever had a gym one day, I'm gonna make it so that people feel comfortable and welcome that
Mhm.
when they walk in. So that's really important to me because I wasn't always treated that way. And then in terms of our competitive team, the cohesiveness, like we worked on a team culture where we came up with a team culture statement. And the idea behind that was how can we all be working sort of under the same vision of what it looks like to function as CHFP, like the weightlifting
Mhm.
team. And, sometimes people join teams because they want a coach to coach them and they want the energy of the people around them to support them in what they are doing, right? So it's like these things are helping this individual, but
Mhm.
sometimes people don't think about it as like, how are you contributing to the team? And that's really important to me, um, because that's who I am, right? So that is something that I wanted to see reflected in the team. So we came up with a team culture statement, the element of, hey, you need to be in service to your teammates. And so that hopefully that's what you're seeing because that is something that we are nurturing.
That's awesome. And it does show it. And I think it does make the difference. I was speaking with another athlete a few weeks ago, and they said one of the reasons that they joined the team that they're on now is because of the community aspect and how the team really makes or breaks individual training sessions. Like she described herself as very intrinsically motivated. She'll go do what she needs to do, but there's a difference between training, by yourself in the corner of the weight room versus training with a team where everyone is invested in the success of every other person on that team. And I think that that makes a difference in individual sport like Olympic weightlifting, where you know when you go out on that platform, you're the ones that has to make or make the lift. But training is so much of what we do that goes into the 6 attempts that we get on the platform. And I think that's important.
Yes, yes. That's interesting you bring this up because just the last two topics on the roundtable that I facilitate, one of them was directly, it was about the culture, but the other one wasn't about the culture. And yet we still got back to the dynamics of like team versus individual. And the team has um, the individuals have the effect on the team, and the people around them, and how oftentimes as coaches we're managing these behaviors that influence the experience for everybody. And one of the coaches said, hey, I don't know why weightlifting coaches don't just approach it like a football team, like we like in and I think and some of the coaches were commenting like we are going in that direction, like we are going in the direction of making athletes treat this like you are on a team. It's not,
Yeah.
you're not just on this individual platform or this individual island by yourself. um, Yeah, because they are having an impact, and an individual athlete is having a impact on the rest of the environment, whether they realize it or not. So sometimes we have to just get to like, hey, this is how we're going to govern ourselves as a team.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting how that continues to be a theme.
Mm,
Um, and
yes.
I did CrossFit, which is what my entry into Olympic weightlifting was. I kind of dabbled in CrossFit for a bit, and I found myself going on certain nights of the week when certain people would be there and when the atmosphere was a particular type of way, and that really drove, whether I was motivated to show up or not. What some people will, what's the WOD today? What's the workout today? I was like, who's going to be there tonight?
Oh,
And
that's
so I think that
interesting.
that's very telling.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
uh,
that's really interesting. Even as a gym owner and a business owner, that's got me thinking, right? About like, and I have a pulse on it every night, but to hear you say like, because others think this way, I think too. Then, so they're making a decision about whether they may or may not want to be in that gym that night based on who's gonna be there and what the energy is. Yeah,
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 yeah.
that makes sense.
Um, we also I also see this when you get new people. We have a ton of new youth lifters. Olympic weightlifting is a varsity high school sport here in Florida. So we get, especially in the off season, we get a lot of our youth lifters, our high school lifters that will come in. And even with that, it creates a different dynamic, a different energy that kind of, you have to keep your pulse on and understanding how to keep those youth athletes inspired and motivated and interested in our sport. I think that's something that we're seeing a lot of in the state of Florida, because Olympic weightlifting is so popular in the high schools.
That's great. I envy that. I have a girl who used to live in Florida, and she's like, "Oh yeah, I used to do cleans and bench press and in the in high school." And I didn't know she went to. I didn't know that when she said that, and I said, "Did you live in Florida?" She goes, "Yeah." I go, "Oh yeah, that's what they got
Yeah,
going on in Florida. It's
yeah,
awesome."
yeah. And now they've
Great.
integrated the snatch into high school lifting. I don't think it's
Really?
mandatory. Yeah, so it was clean and jerk and bench. Now this is the second year, I would say. It's so you can compete in the traditional. So traditional for high school would be this clean and jerk and the bench, or you can compete in the Olympic category, which would be snatch, clean and jerk, and bench together. And so
Mm.
so the high school athletes have an option, but we're finding that they're enjoying the snatch, and we get a lot of our high school athletes that will come in and they're like, I just want to learn the snatch so that I can go back and compete in the Olympic category in the high schools. So
Oh, that's so cool. That's great.
yeah.
So much.
So I want to talk a little bit about your mentorship in your coaching practice, um, because I think that that's something that a lot of my listenership are athletes who are thinking about coaching or new coaches who are kind of transitioning there. How do you approach mentorship within your coaching practice, and what impact do you think that has both for your coaches that you mentor and the athletes that they work with?
Well, I mean, obviously, selfishly, mentoring athletes in my or coaches at CHFP means I'm going to have the support that I need, that the athletes need. So obviously, there's a direct benefit in my gym, but also um, whether if I'm doing the coaches academy, like all of my coaches go through the 12-week coaches academy. So it's
Mhm.
not just one weekend, it's 3 months of a coaching program and mentorship. And that directly benefits my gym, but also hopefully supports weightlifting, the sport of weightlifting, and that coaches are taking it and going back to their clubs and teams and supporting their athletes. So I find it really interesting. I really enjoy mentorship. On my Instagram, I have, that I'm not just a coach, that I'm a coach developer.
Mhm.
And that's important to me. It's for me, it's really a fun intellectual exercise. It's as opposed to like I'm going to fix someone's technique or prepare them for a competition, which feels like, you know, it feels very, very familiar, right?
Hmm.
Being in the warm up room, being in the training hall, coaching athletes to move better, teaching them how to compete and be present in the moment. All that stuff feels very natural to me. Being a coach developer um, is about giving coaches the tools so they can go coach and be who they are, like authentically 100% who they are with their skills and their level of competence. And it's it's really interesting to me. I learn a lot from the coaches that I work with, like constantly.
Yeah.
I mean, I still am developing as a coach. I seek out opportunities to learn, whether it was through the IOC, USOPC International Coach Enrichment Certification Program, the International Weightlifting Federation's Female Train the Trainer Program. Like, I mean, applied to all those and said yes to those opportunities because I'm interested in constantly learning and growing and challenging these ideas that I have and then pivoting and evolving and changing, you know, on those ideas. And so do like coaches that whether they come from other sports, right? Like I have a lacrosse coach on my roundtable. I have Olympic weightlifting coaches. There are CrossFit coaches interested in Olympic weightlifting coaches coaching, right? So we're having these really really good discussions about Olympic weightlifting coaching, but also the nuance of it, right? Like
Hmm.
the like beyond teaching someone how to lift and beyond writing a program and beyond walking someone to a meet, we are talking about overcoming, helping athletes overcome challenges and obstacles. And that's not in a program you can buy off the internet. That is not
Yeah.
in technique, right? That's not in the rules and regulations of a competition. That is learning how to meet the needs of the athletes as they are on their weightlifting journey and navigating it.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting to me.
Yeah. That's so powerful. One of the things that I always share is that I'm an educator. A developer of people. I love educating people. It just so happens to be that sometimes it involves weightlifting. But my goal as an educator is to make you a better person. Whether you snatch 100 kilos or 35 kilos, or whether you do the weightlifting for a year or 10 years or 20 years, I want our journey together to be enriched by the idea that you've learned something about yourself, that you've grown as a person, that you are a kind person. I tell my youth athletes all the time, I go, I want you to be a kind human
Mm-hmm.
being that contributes to society. Whether you are a national champion in weightlifting or not, that will remain to be seen. But I think it's so powerful to kind of put that hat on, that you see that light bulb moment when you're helping an athlete through a difficult situation, or you're helping them navigate I was working with an athlete the other day, helping them navigate the job market. They're like, I'm applying for my very first job, and I'm like, this has nothing to do with the snatch and clean and jerk, but because we met, because you wanted to learn the snatch and clean and jerk, I have the opportunity now to help you land your first job. And to me, that's
Absolutely.
so rewarding.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. I could not agree with you more. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. This is just something I feel like weightlifting is when I was an athlete, it was a tool to help me learn about myself and how to grow. And now as a coach, it's the thing that is bringing me together with other humans. And yes, I know a little bit more about the sport they want to learn about, but they're constantly teaching me. This is just the thing we're doing. We could be musicians and this could be a piano, right?
Yeah.
It's the thing that's bringing us together to teach us about ourselves and each other and create connection. And I love it. The joy of weightlifting. I love it. Love
It's so great.
it.
I was telling someone the other day, in this stage of my life, I am looking forward to everything that is about to change and be flipped on its head. But one of the things that I can always come back to is being an educator. I can, I get to teach people, and I think that that is something that I will hold near and dear to my heart. And it seems like that's something that you share with the barbell as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I didn't even know I definitely didn't want to be a coach. And I thought I didn't want to be a teacher because I didn't want to, there was nothing I wanted to teach, right? I was like, I don't want to teach math. I don't want to teach writing. I don't want to, so I guess I don't want to be a teacher. But then when it occurred to me I could teach weightlifting, I was like, well,
Yeah.
maybe I am a teacher. I
Yeah.
just hadn't found the subject yet. So yeah, I feel you on
Yeah.
that.
You've been involved in this sport for so long, and it has evolved. It is, there's some things that are have stayed the same, but so much of our sport has changed. How do you challenge your own beliefs and practices in the sport? And I guess more specifically, how do you balance the tradition of the sport and the way you grew up in the sport to while connecting with this newer generation of athletes and coaches?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Um, I feel like I I don't think what it is I don't accept tradition as the rule, but rather I'm just sort of like curious about it. So I'm if something comes up that is maybe contradictory, like it's not like how we would do things traditionally, right?
Mhm.
I'm thinking more about it like, how is tradition serving us or not serving us?
Hmm.
And in this new thing that's showing up, why is it showing up? And just being curious about it and it making it less about is the new thing at war with tradition, but more what do we need? How could either one serve us? Is it a little bit of both? What are the consequences? It's just ask a lot of questions. Ask a lot of questions when I'm trying to figure things out.
That's awesome. Uh, Before we wrap up, what is missing from the coaching profession? How do we evolve the standard of coaching in the sport of weightlifting?
It's another good question. I'm sure. I mean, nothing's jumping out at me right away. I would say, um, obviously, continuing to have more women coaches and coaches of color would be fantastic. I'm continuing to working to keep the sport clean.
Hmm.
Um, that's that's a process, and that that's what comes to mind right off the
Hmm.
bat.
I would agree with
Yeah.
that. I would agree with that. I think the USA is leading the charge on clean
Mhm.
athletes,
Yep.
but I definitely think we have some work to do in that area, as well as getting more women coaches and coaches of color involved in the sport. And I hope to see that grow, and I hope to see that evolve as we go, which is kind of for me one of the driving forces of me remaining, you know, involved as much as I can be, because I do think that people are watching, and women are watching, and they need to see that there is a space for them, and that they're welcomed, and that they're wanted, and create that accessibility. So that's one thing for me, at least, that is kind of a motivating factor for making sure that I stay involved, and stay committed to the sport.
And that's the thing. I couldn't agree with you more, Naja. It's showing up in the ways that we can, and literally we're doing the work. With
Hmm.
it's your podcast, your coaching, the Coaches Academy. I'm doing the Coaches Roundtable. It's not like it's not just about speaking or like advocacy. It's like this is we are doing it, and others are doing it as well.
Hmm.
And I think we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah. I'm always interested when I see things like on social media, and I'm never one of like conspiracy theories of like, oh, women are being excluded, and I'm always finding a way to
Yeah.
figure out how we can amplify the voices of coaches of color and women of color, and especially women coaches of color, which is what I see the fewest of. I
Yeah.
sometimes will see lists where people are like, my top 5 coaches or my top 3 inspirations. And I go, mm, okay, but where are the women? Where are the women of color? You know, how can we amplify their voices? And I think that is something that I'd like to see more of in our
Mhm.
sport and in our profession.
Agreed. Agreed. And I think it is definitely helpful. I did a talk on I can't remember the name of the talk, but it was through the IWF. And one of the things that we were talking about is, and I talked about in my talk was um, the importance of, allies and support. So
Mm-hmm.
male coaches, um, basically saying, "Hey, we're gonna support you, include you, send the invitation." And I
Mm-hmm.
can say I get those. I am getting those.
Mm-hmm.
I get those invitations. I get the support. But I'm also out there more. Like my name is out there more. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, but it's also pushing coaches to say, who can you go get in your own gym, right? What the research says that the women that if we were going to look for more women coaches, it's the female athletes are the most obvious ones. So if you have
Mm-hmm.
female athletes in your gym, it's it's making sure you're not overlooking them when you're thinking
Right.
about who can come in, who can come up as coach, right? Who you can pull
Right.
up as coaches, and not overlooking the women and coaches of color and saying, okay, you, right? Whether it's a conscious decision in a coach's mind, or if it's an application process, whatever it is, it's like, hey, extend those opportunities to those people. And when I think back on Kyle Pierce or
Mm-hmm.
Ursula, right? Or those coaches were saying, yeah, you. And I was saying, I don't see it. And they're saying, yeah, you. And I'm
Yeah.
like, and then literally creating the physical opportunity, come and be
Mm-hmm.
here, right?
Right.
Um, and that changed everything. So I've just shared that story in the sense that, you know, sometimes it's right there, it's right underneath your nose, and you just have to just see it, like,
Yeah.
and do it. And even when you think of the gym you're in, with
Yeah.
Danny Camargo and Jen, like the representation you guys have at your gym, it's commendable.
Yeah. Yeah. I really do appreciate he does a really great job of and I don't even think I don't think it's something that is he has to intentionally do. I think that's just who he is, that
Mhm.
he wants the
Mhm.
best person and he wants to make sure that his coaching staff is representative of the athletes that he serves. And I think that that goes a
Mhm.
long way.
I dig it.
I have a quick I have a quick game for you. You ready? It's a quick game of this or that. It's rapid
Okay,
fire. Okay, we're gonna
got
get
it.
to know you a little bit better. Um, see what Cara prefers. We'll start
Okay.
here. Morning training or an evening session?
Sorry,
Okay.
I'm not really bad at this because I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, and it's gonna be like, I don't know, 11 o'clock or 2 o'clock. So morning,
I'm
maybe I'll do morning.
okay. Okay. I will say this, and we'll get back to it. I am a 2 o'clocker. I like 2 o'clock is like a really great time
Mhm.
for me.
Mhm.
I could do an 11. I can do an 11. So
Mhm.
if I had to choose, it'd be morning too.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, when I was an actual competitive athlete, it was 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Here we go. It's a this or that, Kara. It's an A or B.
I'm failing. Okay, go.
Snatch or clean and jerk.
Snatch.
Squats or pulls.
Squats.
Kettlebells or dumbbells.
Dumbbells.
The Nike Romaleos or Adipowers.
I like the wide ones. Tears.
Okay.
Failing
See
again.
here.
That's not what you asked me.
We will add a C. I'm gonna
Right.
rename this segment just for you. Let's see,
This
volume or
or the other. Sorry,
this,
go ahead.
that, or whatever you're gonna choose. Volume or strength cycle.
Ugh, strength.
Reading books or listening to podcasts when you're traveling to a meet.
Podcast.
Beach or mountains.
Beach.
Okay, okay, I can see that. That's all I have for you. Before you go, this podcast is all about going beyond the reps and finding the strength in the details. So, what is your one strength in the detail that you want listeners to take away from this episode?
Oof. I'm gonna summarize.
Just one little.
And Naja, you stopped. I thought it was over after this or that. I don't know. Can we let people glean what they're going to glean and go from there? I don't know.
Okay, we will get a fresh take from Cara. Um, I would say that I really enjoyed your takeaway of we have to be able to trust the entire process and follow the process. I think that's one thing that I've seen be a constant struggle just with, athletes, people on social media, like trust the process and actually give it a chance to play out. Like
Yeah.
it's not gonna be perfect and there's gonna be lots that we can learn from it. But before we can evaluate something, we have to see it through. um,
Right.
so I think that was something very powerful that I hope people take away.
Cool.
See, we did this together. Teamwork.
That works for me. Teamwork. I'm in it.
Thank you so much for being a guest. I cannot wait to share this episode. And I know that people will have a lot of gems that they take away from this episode. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.